This is Mr. E of the Bearded Music Teacher podcast. And today's episode, if I'm not mistaken, this is episode 9 of this long series of different episodes in the history of rock. And right now, we're still in the beginnings of rock. And just to give you a little bit of background on this podcast, if you're just joining us for this episode and you're brand new to this channel, this series of podcasts are devoted for my students to take a look at just the facts, just a concise, boiled down, this is what it is, without any um, extra discussions between students and us, looking at the materials in the way of like the videos and the listening activities and the playlists and things like that. So this is just a quick summary of this of each topic or a idea, I guess you could say. And so today we are looking at Jerry Lee Lewis. If I'm not mistaken, he was born in the year 1935, I want to say. I'm almost positive he was. And he was perhaps the wildest of them all. And he began playing piano when he was just 7 years old. And there's one guy that we need to talk about, which is Sam Phillips, and he was the original Sun Records recording of one of Jerry Lee Lewis's most famous tracks, "Great Balls of Fire," appears in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But he Jerry Lee Lewis did record with Sam Phillips of Sun Records. We may actually do a podcast episode about that because Sam Phillips is also known for another person of the first wave of rock as well. So he recorded a whole lot of shaking going on, "Great Balls of Fire," "Breathless," and "High School Confidential," just to name a few. And it was his pounding piano, which is very, very similar to Little Richard, that bombastic, in-your-face style. But he kind of takes it a little differently. He's known as rockabilly. He's a guy that is definitely known for his pounding piano, but also kind of sounds more along the lines of Elvis rather than Little Richard. And so he was also known as the Killer, which I still haven't found out why he was known as the Killer. I don't know. Maybe he killed pianos. I don't know. But he balanced the sacred and the profane like nothing that had ever been heard in American pop music up until this point. And that's what really kind of sets him apart. And he really did strike fears and a lot of strike fear in the hearts. There we go, of the parents of the American teenager, because this was new territory for the parents. Jerry Lee Lewis was not afraid of them, and he was very much pushing the envelope. He was rock and roll. Now he did show up unannounced to Sun Records in Memphis in 1956, and everyone was just like, "Who is this?" He was an unknown who was performing. Experience was limited to low rent nightclubs and establishments in Faraday, Louisiana, where he grew up. And he just was like, "Hey, I'm here to play, and this is what's going to happen. You're going to like it, and that's just the end of it." So his fiery personality, shaped by competing forces of music and the religion that he grew up with, while he absorbed an array of different styles of music, different um, he was as much into the quote white music as he was into the, using historical context, quote black music. Um, and so he did kind of blend those two together, and he blew Sam Phillips away. Now there is we talk about Elvis. There is a two-part like movie, if you will, and you'll see that where Sam Phillips, he records at Sun Records and he's looking for a white artist that sounds like he's African American, that he sounds like the R&B stuff that he really wants to, and Sun Records was known for that kind of thing. So at the time, Sun Records was still hot when they when they launched the career of Elvis Presley, but then sold Presley's contract off to RCA Victor, or I'm sorry, RCA Records, and we'll talk about that when we talk about Elvis. And so they were looking for a new guy to head up the label, a new face of the label, and that was Jerry Lee Lewis. So his immense ego and his reckless nature of his performances and his personal life, um, combine that with his uh, very interesting charisma, and that's what really made him appeal to a lot of the uh, the teens. Now, he did have a distinct vocal style, singing between country ballads and raw blues, Tin Pan Alley little things, and then just gospel. He did it all, and he brought it all together into rock tunes. And really, the only one that he was really known for was indeed Great Balls of Fire. A whole I in the classroom, I give them that one and a whole lot of shaking going on. There's a lot of great things that you could pull from that, uh, and I would highly recommend that you do that. But one thing that we have to be aware of is that his career, although it began in '56, it ended pretty abruptly and almost completely in 1958. He was caught up in a scandal which involved um, his divorce from his ex-wife or his previous wife, and his marriage to Myra Gale Brown, um, which was at that time a very scandalous thing, and probably by today's measure, pretty scandalous. And if you want to take a look at that, I tell my students that if you really want to get into that, get your parents' permission and look into it. But when that scandal broke and it was involving him being, his divorce wasn't quite final, if I remember correct with my research. And he actually was married to another woman. So back then that was like, whoo, but then there's another layer to it that just makes it even worse. And he was instantly deemed a pariah among performers and among a lot of places. As a matter of fact, they Sun Records just let their contract expire with them in '63. No one really played his stuff on the radio. His performances were just gone. His fees for performance took a nosedive, and he fell pretty much right out of the charts at the time that the scandal broke. It was fast. Um, he did have a pretty strong comeback in the 1960s as a country ballad singer. So he did kind of tone everything down. He did have a little bit of a resurgence in the '70s, um, but that was pretty much it. One Lewis is one of the handful of artists of rock's first generation to survive into and remain musically active into the 2000s, um, still performing music that was pretty much of note in the smaller genres, the smaller corners of country music. But it's not anything like Great Balls of Fire and a whole lot of shaking going on. So, what I would do, I would recommend again, we don't play any songs on this podcast for copyright reasons. I would dive into Great Balls of Fire and a whole lot of shaking going on. That is a very high tempo, high speed, rockabilly kind of sound. You'll definitely get the fusion of rockabilly and or I'm sorry, of rock music and that hillbilly bluegrass kind of music. You'll get a good feel on what that would be like. And rockabilly music is still played and has fans to this day, even. So that would be something I would look into, and I would also look into Sun Records. If you don't get a chance to listen to the next podcast about this after we get done talking about the first wave of rock, there's going to be something about Sam Phillips of Sun Records. So if you don't get a chance to check that out, make sure you just do a little bit of research of Sun Records. They're very, very important to the way um, rock music developed in the United States. All right, that ends it for this podcast. Remember to follow me on Twitter at MR, it's Mr. E, so MR underscore E underscore music FCS. Share this podcast, share this YouTube channel. This stuff will be posted on YouTube. And if you're an audio listener, you're going to wrap this up by listening to a good friend of mine, Taylor Shannon, perform the song September.